What if I told you that everything holding you back right now, every dream you haven't chased, every conversation you haven't had, every risk you haven't taken, comes down to one single thing? Not lack of talent, not bad timing, not even bad luck. It's fear. And here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. Fear is winning. It's winning right now, in this very moment, for millions of people around the world. But what if 2026 could be different? What if this could be the year you finally break free? Look, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that fear is just an illusion or that you can simply think positive thoughts and watch it disappear. That's nonsense. Fear is real. It's hardwired into your brain, and it kept your ancestors alive when they were running from predators. But here's what's changed. We're not running from lions anymore. We're running from phone calls, from difficult conversations, from starting that business, from asking that person out, from speaking our truth. We've taken this ancient survival mechanism and turned it into a prison. Let me share something with you. There was a study done a few years ago where researchers asked people in their 80s and 90s about their biggest regrets. You know what they found? Almost nobody regretted the things they did. They regretted what they didn't do, the chances they didn't take, the words they didn't say, the dreams they didn't chase. And when asked why, the answer was always the same: fear. They were afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of being rejected. And that fear cost them decades of potential joy, growth, and fulfillment. So let's talk about what fear actually is. At its core, fear is your brain's way of trying to protect you. It sees potential danger, and it hits the alarm button. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and your mind starts spinning worst-case scenarios. This is the amygdala doing its job. But here's the problem. Your amygdala can't tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. It treats a job interview the same way it treats a bear attack. It treats asking someone on a date the same way it treats standing on the edge of a cliff. This is why understanding fear is so crucial. When you realize that most of your fears are not about actual physical danger, but about psychological discomfort, ego threats, or social rejection, you start to see them differently. You start to realize that what you're really afraid of isn't the thing itself, but the story you're telling yourself about what might happen. Think about it. When you're afraid to start that project, what are you really afraid of? Usually, it's not the work itself. It's the fear that you'll fail and people will judge you, or that you'll succeed and then have to maintain that success, or that you'll discover you're not as talented as you thought. See how these are all stories. They're narratives your mind creates about a future that hasn't happened yet. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your brain is incredibly powerful, but it's also incredibly lazy. It wants to conserve energy, so it relies on patterns and shortcuts. If you've been afraid of something once and that fear kept you safe, your brain files that away as useful information. The next time a similar situation comes up, boom, fear response is activated. This is why fears compound over time. Every time you avoid something because of fear, you're teaching your brain that the fear was justified. You're reinforcing the pattern. But the opposite is also true. Every time you feel fear and do the thing anyway, you're teaching your brain that the fear was unnecessary. You're rewiring the circuitry. This is neuroplasticity in action, and it's one of the most hopeful discoveries in modern neuroscience. Your brain can change. Your fear responses can change, but only if you actively work to change them. Let me tell you about the comfort zone myth. Everyone talks about stepping outside your comfort zone like it's this one-time thing. You take a big leap, feel uncomfortable for a bit, and then you're transformed. That's not how it works. Your comfort zone is like a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. If you stay in the same safe space for too long, that space actually gets smaller. Things that used to feel normal start to feel scary. This is why people who isolate themselves often develop more anxiety over time, not less. But when you consistently push against the edges of your comfort zone, something magical happens. It expands. Things that terrified you last month feel manageable today. Not because you became a different person, but because you trained your nervous system to handle discomfort. You proved to your brain, over and over again, that you can survive the thing you were afraid of. So how do we actually do this? How do we conquer fear in 2026? First, you need to get specific. Vague fears are the hardest to fight because they're everywhere and nowhere at once. Instead of saying I'm afraid of failure, ask yourself, what specifically am I afraid will happen if I fail at this particular thing? Will I lose money? Will people laugh at me? Will I feel embarrassed? Get granular. Because once you name the specific fear, you can start to examine whether it's rational. Most of the time, when you really look at your fears closely, you realize they're either unlikely to happen or not as catastrophic as you imagined. Yes, you might feel embarrassed if you fail, but will you actually die? Will your life be over? Will everyone you know abandon you? Probably not. And even if the worst-case scenario did happen, could you handle it? The answer is almost always yes. Here's a powerful exercise. Take whatever you're afraid of and play it all the way out to the worst possible outcome. Really go there. Imagine everything goes wrong. Now ask yourself, if that happened, what would I do next? You'll usually find that even in the worst-case scenario, there's a next step. There's a way forward. This realization alone can strip fear of much of its power. Another crucial aspect of conquering fear is understanding the difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is a response to a present threat. Anxiety is fear about something that might happen in the future. Most of what we call fear is actually anxiety, which means we're suffering over things that haven't happened and might never happen. Think about how insane that is. We're literally making ourselves miserable about fictional scenarios. The antidote to anxiety is presence. When you're fully in the present moment, anxiety can't exist because anxiety only lives in the future. This is why practices like meditation, deep breathing, and mindfulness are so effective. They pull you back into now, where you're usually actually safe. Try this next time you're feeling anxious. Look around you. Describe what you see, hear, smell, and feel. Ground yourself in the present moment. You'll often find that right now, in this moment, you're okay. Let's talk about the role of action. Here's something most people don't realize. You don't need confidence before you act. That's backwards. Action creates confidence. Every time you do something despite being afraid, you build evidence for yourself that you can handle fear. That evidence becomes confidence. So if you're waiting to feel confident before you make a move, you're going to be waiting forever. The confidence comes after, not before. This is why the phrase "feel the fear and do it anyway" is so powerful. It's not about eliminating fear. It's about changing your relationship with it. Instead of seeing fear as a stop sign, start seeing it as a sign that you're on the edge of growth. If something scares you, that usually means it matters to you. It means you're about to do something that could change your life. But let's be real, some fears are harder than others. There are everyday fears, like speaking up in a meeting or trying something new. Then there are the deep ones, the fears that touch our core identity. Fear of being unlovable, fear of being inadequate, fear of being truly seen. These fears often stem from childhood experiences or past traumas, and they're not going to disappear overnight. For these deeper fears, you might need more than just willpower. You might need therapy, you might need support, you might need time. And that's okay. Conquering fear isn't about being fearless. It's about being willing to work with your fear, to understand where it comes from, and to gradually reduce its control over your life. It's a practice, not a destination. Here's something that might surprise you. Some of the most successful, accomplished people in the world still feel fear regularly. The difference is they've learned not to let that fear make their decisions for them. They feel it, they acknowledge it, and then they act anyway. This is courage, not the absence of fear, but action in the presence of fear. Think about the people you admire most. The ones who've built something, created something, changed something. Do you think they weren't afraid? Of course, they were afraid. They were terrified, but they did it anyway. And here's what they discovered. The anticipation of fear is almost always worse than the reality. We build things up in our minds. We catastrophize. We imagine all the terrible things that could happen. Then we do the thing and realize it wasn't that bad. Sometimes it's even good. This is the fear paradox. The more you avoid something, the scarier it becomes. The more you face something, the less scary it becomes. So every day you don't do the thing you're afraid of, you're making it harder to do tomorrow. But every day you do take action, even small action, you're making it easier for future you. Let me give you a practical framework. Start with small fears. Don't try to conquer your biggest, darkest fear on day one. That's like trying to run a marathon when you haven't jogged in years. Start small. Afraid of talking to strangers? Say hello to one person today. Afraid of public speaking? Speak up once in your next meeting. Afraid of putting your work out there? Share one small piece. Build momentum. Collect evidence that you can do hard things. As you build that evidence, you'll notice something. Your identity starts to shift. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who's controlled by fear, you start seeing yourself as someone who faces fear. This identity shift is crucial because we tend to act in accordance with how we see ourselves. If you see yourself as brave, you'll do brave things. If you see yourself as fearful, you'll continue to avoid. Now let's address something important. Social media and modern culture have created a strange relationship with fear. On one hand, we're bombarded with messages telling us to be fearless, to take risks, to live our best lives. On the other hand, we're constantly exposed to other people's highlight reels, which makes us more afraid of failure and judgment. We see everyone else seemingly succeeding, and our own fears feel more justified. Here's the truth that nobody posts about. Everyone is afraid. Everyone is dealing with their own fears and insecurities. The person you think has it all figured out, they're scared too. The difference is whether they let that fear stop them or not. So stop comparing your internal reality to everyone else's external image. It's not a fair comparison, and it's making your fear worse. Another modern fear that's become epidemic is the fear of missing out. We're so afraid of making the wrong choice, of closing off options, of missing some better opportunity, that we end up paralyzed. We don't choose anything because we're afraid of choosing wrong. But here's a secret. There is no perfect choice. There's only the choice you make and what you do with it afterwards. The most successful people aren't the ones who made perfect choices. They're the ones who made choices and then committed to making them work. Let's talk about failure because this is the big one for most people. We're terrified of failure. But what even is failure? Usually, it's just feedback. It's information about what doesn't work, so you can adjust and try again. Thomas Edison didn't fail 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. He found 1,000 ways that didn't work. That's not failure, that's research. The only real failure is not trying. If you try something and it doesn't work, you've learned something. You've grown. You've gathered data. You're closer to success than you were before. But if you don't try at all because you're afraid of failing, you've failed by default. You've let fear win without even putting up a fight. Here's a mental reframe that changed everything for me. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Start asking, what if I succeed? What if it works out? What if it's amazing? What if this is the thing that changes everything? We spend so much time imagining worst-case scenarios, but why not imagine best-case scenarios too? Not to be naive or unrealistic, but to balance out the negativity bias our brains naturally have. Your brain is wired to focus on threats and potential problems. That's how we survived as a species. But in the modern world, that same wiring often holds us back. So you have to consciously counterbalance it. For every fear-based thought, generate an opportunity-based thought. For every what if this goes wrong, add a what if this goes right. Train your brain to see possibility alongside risk. Now, I want to address something that doesn't get talked about enough. Sometimes fear is actually useful. If you're afraid because something is genuinely dangerous or harmful, that's your intuition talking, and you should listen. The key is learning to distinguish between protective fear and limiting fear. Protective fear keeps you safe from real threats. Limiting fear keeps you small and prevents growth. How do you tell the difference? Ask yourself, is this fear based on actual danger, or is it based on discomfort, ego, or social anxiety? Is this fear protecting my body or protecting my comfort zone? Real danger deserves respect. Discomfort deserves courage. Let me share something about the relationship between fear and purpose. Often, the things we're most afraid of are connected to the things we care about most deeply. If you're afraid to share your art, it's because your art matters to you. If you're afraid to tell someone you love them, it's because that relationship matters. If you're afraid to start your business, it's because that vision matters. Fear points to what's important. So instead of running from your fears, follow them. They'll lead you to your purpose. This year, 2026, can be the year you change your relationship with fear. But it requires a decision. A real decision. Not just a wish or a hope, but a commitment to doing things differently. It means accepting that discomfort is part of growth. It means being willing to look foolish, to fail, to be rejected, and to do it anyway. Here's what I want you to understand. You have more control than you think. You can't control whether you feel fear. That's automatic. But you can control what you do with that fear. You can control whether you let it stop you or whether you use it as fuel. You can control whether you listen to the fearful voice in your head or whether you thank it for its input and move forward anyway. The brain is plastic, remember? It can change, but it needs consistent input. If you want to be less fearful, you need to consistently practice being brave. Small acts of bravery, repeated over time, create lasting change. It's not about one big moment of courage. It's about choosing courage over comfort again and again and again. Think about where you could be a year from now if you started facing one fear per week. That's 52 fears conquered. 52 times, you prove to yourself that you're capable. 52 pieces of evidence that fear doesn't have to control you. How different would your life look? How different would you feel? The tragedy isn't that we have fears. The tragedy is when we let those fears dictate our entire lives. When we look back and realize we spent decades playing it safe, staying small, not taking chances. When we realize that the things we were so afraid of were never as scary as a life unlived. You know what's scarier than failure? Regret. You know what's scarier than rejection? Never trying. You know what's scarier than looking foolish? Dying with your music still inside you, as they say. All the things you could have done, could have been, could have created, could have experienced, locked away because you were too afraid. But it doesn't have to be that way. You get to choose. Every single day, you get to choose. Will you listen to fear, or will you listen to possibility? Will you play it safe, or will you bet on yourself? Will you let anxiety about an imaginary future ruin your actual present? These are choices, not inevitabilities. I'm not saying it's easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. But it's simple. Feel the fear, acknowledge it, thank your brain for trying to protect you, and then do the thing anyway. Start small, build momentum, collect evidence, shift your identity, expand your comfort zone. Repeat. That's the formula. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. You don't become fearless. You become free. Free from the tyranny of what other people think. Free from the prison of perfectionism. Free from the paralysis of overthinking. You become someone who feels fear and acts anyway. And that version of you can do anything. The world needs more people who are willing to face their fears, who are willing to try, to create, to speak up, to take chances, who are willing to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to be imperfect. Because that's where real connection happens. That's where real innovation happens. That's where real life happens. So here's my challenge to you. What's one fear you're going to face this week? Just one. What's one thing you've been avoiding because of fear that you're going to do anyway? It doesn't have to be huge. Small actions count. In fact, small actions repeated are how you build an entirely new life. Maybe it's having that difficult conversation you've been putting off. Maybe it's starting that project you've been thinking about for months. Maybe it's sharing something you created. Maybe it's setting a boundary. Maybe it's admitting you need help. Maybe it's applying for that job. Maybe it's going to that event alone. Maybe it's saying I love you first. Maybe it's saying no. Maybe it's saying yes. Whatever it is, I want you to feel the fear, acknowledge it, and do it anyway. Then I want you to notice what happens. Notice that you survived. Notice that it probably wasn't as bad as you imagined. Notice the sense of accomplishment you feel. Notice how you proved something to yourself. That's evidence. Collect it. And I want to hear from you. What fear are you going to conquer this week? Drop it in the comments below. Not just for me, but for you. There's something powerful about declaring your intention publicly. It makes it real. It creates accountability. And it might inspire someone else to face their fear, too. Remember, fear is not your enemy. It's a signal, it's information, it's your brain trying to help. But it doesn't get to be in charge. You're in charge. You get to decide whether fear is a stop sign or a mile marker. You get to decide whether it controls you or whether you work with it. The truth is, the life you want is on the other side of the things you're afraid of. The relationship you want requires vulnerability. The career you want requires risk. The person you want to become requires change. And all of those things feel scary, but they're also the path forward. So as we move through 2026, I want you to make this the year you stop letting fear win. Make this the year you do the scary things. Make this the year you bet on yourself. Make this the year you prove to yourself what you're actually capable of. Because you're capable of so much more than you think. You really are. Your fear is valid, but it's not the truth. It's just one voice in your head, and you don't have to let it be the loudest one. You can choose to listen to the voice of possibility, the voice of courage, the voice that says, "What if this is amazing?" That voice is there too. It's quieter, but it's there. And it's telling you the truth. So what's it going to be? Are you going to let 2026 be another year where fear calls the shots? Or are you going to take back control? Are you going to play it safe and stay stuck? Or are you going to feel the fear and do it anyway? The choice is yours. It always has been. And if you found this helpful, if this resonated with you, if this gave you even a tiny bit of courage to face something you've been avoiding, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more people find this message. And subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep having these conversations. We're going to keep exploring what it means to live fully, authentically, courageously. And I want you to be part of that journey. Your future self is watching you right now. What do you want them to see? Someone who played it safe? Or someone brave? Make them proud. Face your fear. Do the thing. Prove to yourself what you already know deep down. You're capable of more than you think. Now go show yourself what that looks like.